Loveliest listener of the ton. On the night London decided she was nothing, Miss Vivian Ashcroft wore the color of mourning and carried the name of a dead woman, not out of grief, out of strategy. The Vandermeer Masquerade was the ton's great annual indulgence, an evening where London permitted itself the luxury of pretending that identity did not matter, that rank could be forgotten, that one might be anyone behind a painted mask. It was, of course, the opposite of true. At a masquerade, London watched harder, judged faster, and ruined more quietly. Vivian arrived precisely when the candles had burned low enough to make everything look flattering. She was 24, dark-haired, with a mouth that promised things she never intended to deliver, and eyes that measured rooms the way surveyors measured land, cataloging value, identifying threat. She wore a gown of deep charcoal silk that cost more than she could afford, a silver half-mask trimmed in black lace, and a composure so absolute it looked almost unkind. At her elbow, her cousin, Lord Basil Mortlake, smiled the smile of a man who believed he was holding a leash. "Remember," Basil murmured, adjusting his own gold-trimmed mask, "you are here as my companion, not as a guest in your own right. Smile, be pleasant, and for God's sake, do not speak to anyone of consequence." Vivian returned a perfectly composed nod. Of course, Basil. She did not say what she was truly thinking, that tonight she would speak to exactly one person of consequence, and that person would change everything. The ballroom of Vandermeer House was a cathedral built for vanity, gilded ceiling, mirrors so vast they doubled the crowd, and chandeliers that threw every face into amber drama, silk and secret, feather and flame. Half of London wore the faces of ancient gods or mythical beasts, the other half simply wore their wealth and called it a costume. Vivian moved through the room with practiced invisibility, present enough to observe, contained enough to be overlooked. She was looking for a letter. More precisely, she was looking for the man who had it. 3 weeks ago, in the library of Mortlake House, she had overheard the thing that changed her life. Basil, speaking to his solicitor, voice low and certain. "The Ashcroft title is extinct. Everyone agrees. There is no heir, which means the lands revert to me." A pause. The solicitor's reply, careful. "There is the matter of the girl, my lord." Basil, dismissive. "She knows nothing. She has nothing, and she will go where I send her." But Vivian had known something. She had known about the letter. The letter her mother pressed into her hands the night she died, whispering, "Find the seal, find the man who holds the deed, tell him who you are." Her mother's name was Lady Catherine Ashcroft, which meant Vivian's name, her real name, her full name, the one Basil had spent years quietly erasing, was Vivian Ashcroft, Countess of Dunmore. A title London believed had died 30 years ago, a title Basil intended to claim by the month's end. She had one night to stop him, and the only man in England who could help her was somewhere in this room. Duke Alexander Vasily of Morvain, not an English duke, a Carpathian one, which meant the ton did not quite know what to do with him, could not slot him into their familiar hierarchies, could not trace his bloodline through Debrett's, could not predict his loyalties or leverage his debts. He arrived in London 4 months ago on what he called a diplomatic mission and what London called an invasion of irresistible mystery. He was 32, broad-shouldered, with a face that was all clean angles and restrained force. dark hair worn slightly longer than English fashion approved of, eyes the color of winter storm clouds, and a stillness about him that made other men in the room appear to be fidgeting even when they stood perfectly still. The whispers were, as always, contradictory. He owns 3 castles. He lost them all in a war. He's a spy. He's a scholar. He never removes his mask at masquerades. He sees through everyone else's anyway. Vivian had spent a week identifying him through rumor and then through observation. She had spent another week determining that he was, against all odds, a man of genuine integrity, the sort who kept records, honored debts, and did not traffic in ruined women. She had spent the 3rd week composing what she was about to say to him. She found him near the east windows, half turned from the room, examining a painting of a storm at sea with the focused attention of a man who preferred the painting to the party. His mask was simple, black, unadorned, covering his upper face. He wore no costume, simply black and charcoal, impeccably tailored, a silver pin at his cravat. Vivian approached from the left. He heard her anyway. "The ships in that painting," she said quietly in French, the language she had chosen deliberately, as a signal, "are sinking." A beat. Duke Alexander turned slowly. His storm-colored eyes found her through the masks between them. "Yes," he replied also in French, his accent layered and warm. "But the painter made them beautiful on the way down." Vivian's pulse quickened once and then steadied. "That," she said, "is either very romantic or very practical." The Duke's mouth curved, not quite a smile, but the preparation for one. "In Morvain," he said, "they are the same thing." Vivian allowed 3 seconds of silence, then said plainly, "I need your help, Your Grace. I have approximately 40 minutes before my cousin realizes I am not where he left me, and approximately 4 weeks before he steals a title that belongs to me." The Duke's expression shifted from guarded warmth to focused attention. "You're direct," he observed. "I don't have time to be charming." The Duke looked at her for a long moment. Then, "Tell me." She told him quickly and without embellishment. The Ashcroft earldom, the extinct title, her mother's letter which she had memorized to the syllable, Basil's plan, the deed, the legal instrument that would confirm her identity and her claim, which Basil's solicitor had quietly removed from the family archive and which, according to the one loyal maid still in the house, had been sold to a collector of legal curiosities. That collector was the Duke of Morvain. He had bought it 3 months ago, not knowing what it was. Vivienne watched his face as the realization landed. To his credit, he did not look away. "I have it," he said. "It's at my residence in Belgrave Square." Vivienne's breath trembled, only once. "Will you return it?" she asked. "I will do better," the Duke said. "I will witness it." "You understand," Vivienne said carefully, "that if you do this, if you stand beside me tonight, Basil will make you his enemy." Alexander's expression did not shift. "Your cousin," he said, "has already attempted to delay my diplomatic correspondence for 2 months, bribed one of my attachés, and told 3 separate hostesses that I am financially ruined." A pause. "I am not particularly frightened of him." Vivienne blinked. "You knew?" "I suspected." The Duke's eyes warmed slightly. "I did not know why. Now I do." He offered his arm. "Shall we give London a better story than the one your cousin has been writing?" Vivienne looked at his arm. At this man she had met 12 minutes ago, at the offer that could save her or ruin her, or both. Then she placed her hand on his sleeve. "Try to keep pace," she murmured. The Duke's mouth curved fully, finally, into something that was absolutely a smile. "I'll do my best," he said. They returned to the ballroom together. That was the first scandal, a foreign duke escorting a woman no one could quite place through a crowd that had spent 20 years being told she was unimportant. Whispers rose like smoke. "Who is she?" "She came with Mortlake." "She's left Mortlake." "He's going to be furious." They moved directly to the center of the room, where Basil stood. Basil, in his golden mask, turned as they approached, and his face did that specific thing that faces do when a plan meets an obstacle it hadn't imagined. It went very still, and then very careful. "Vivienne," his voice was silk over stone, "I see you've wandered." Vivienne's voice was entirely calm. "I've arrived, actually." Basil's gaze moved to Alexander. "Your Grace," he said with the warmth of a man who needed something. "Mortlake." Alexander's voice was neither cold nor warm. It was simply precise. "This is the deed of title to the Ashcroft earldom, Countess of Dunmore. I purchased it recently from a private collection." I paused. I was unaware at the time of its significance. A ripple moved through the nearest cluster of guests. Basil's smile did not move. "A fascinating curiosity," he said smoothly. "As I'm sure you know, the Ashcroft line is extant," Alexander said. Silence. "The title," Alexander continued, "passes through the maternal line, as specified in the original letter's patent, which means it did not die with the last earl. It passed to his daughter, a beat, and then to her daughter." The room made the sound that ballrooms make when they realize they are about to witness something historic, a collective inhale, barely audible, absolutely felt. Basil's voice dropped dangerously. "This is absurd." Alexander's eyes moved to him, unimpressed. "The documents are notarized, witnessed, and in order. You are welcome to examine them." Basil turned on Vivienne. "You," he said, voice cracking at its edges. "You arranged this. You've been scheming behind my—" "Basil." Vivienne's voice quiet, clear, like a door being opened that had been locked for years. "You told me I had nothing," she said. "You told me I was no one. You told me to smile and be pleasant and not to speak to anyone of consequence." A pause. The room held its breath. Vivienne looked at her cousin with eyes that had finished grieving. "You were wrong on all 3 counts." What happened next would be discussed in drawing rooms for years. Basil, Lord Mortlake, who had hosted these people at his table, who had borrowed their money and accepted their deference and traded on their trust, turned the color of old ivory. He looked around the room for allies. He found none. Because London, whatever its cruelties, loved a revelation above all else, and this one had teeth. A baroness near the fireplace said loud enough to carry, "Good God, Mortlake has been managing her estate." A lord beside her added, dry as dust, "or mismanaging." A woman in a peacock mask turned to her companion and whispered what London would whisper for weeks. She was the Countess the whole time. Basil made one final attempt. He stepped toward Vivienne, voice dropping low, visible threat wrapped in composure. "You have no proof beyond a piece of paper," he hissed. "A deed without corroboration is nothing. You have no witnesses. You have no—" "She has me." Alexander's voice, quiet, immovable. Basil turned. Alexander stood with the stillness of a man who had already decided the outcome and found it unremarkable. "I am a duke of a sovereign nation, with full standing before English law as a diplomatic witness. I will testify to the document's authenticity. I will testify to what I have heard in this room tonight." His eyes held Basil's. "And I will ensure that every solicitor, magistrate, and peer in London has a copy of this deed before Monday morning." A silence so thorough it felt like the end of something. Then Basil did something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He left the room. Not grandly, not triumphantly. He simply walked to the door, and the crowd parted, not because of respect, but because they could not be associated with what he had become. In the middle of the Vandermeer ballroom, Vivian Ashcroft, Countess of Dunmore, stood in her charcoal gown and silver mask and breathed, just breathed. Because the thing she had feared for years had happened. London had looked at her, truly looked at her, and she had not collapsed. She had expanded. Alexander found her 20 minutes later in a corridor near the musicians' gallery, where the candlelight was softer and the crowd's hunger did not quite reach. She had removed her mask. He had removed his. They looked at each other finally, with nothing between them. "You didn't tell me that you already knew about Mortlake." Alexander was quiet for a moment. "No," he admitted. Vivian's gaze was steady. "Why?" Alexander's jaw tightened, not with guilt, but with the precision of a man being careful. "Because," he said, "I had suspected something was wrong for weeks. The document, Mortlake's interference, the pattern." A pause. "I wanted to know if you would come to me yourself, or if you would wait to be rescued." Vivian looked at him for a long beat. "And if I had waited?" she asked. Alexander's eyes softened, barely. "Then I would have brought it to you," he said quietly. "I wasn't going to let him win, but I wanted—" He paused, as though choosing honesty over performance. "I wanted to see who you were before I decided how to help." Vivian's chest tightened. "That is very presumptuous," she said. "Yes," he agreed. "You had no right to test me." "No," he said, "I didn't." He held her gaze without flinching. "I came to the party anyway," Vivian said finally. "You did," he said. "I came with a plan, a good one. I didn't need saving." Alexander's mouth curved. "No," he said, "you needed a witness. There's a difference." Vivian looked at this man, this stranger who had held her deed to her identity for 3 months without knowing it, who had watched Basil with quiet suspicion, who had come to a masquerade and removed his mask before she removed hers. She thought about what it meant to trust someone who had kept things from her. She thought about what it meant that she understood exactly why he had. "Witness," she said slowly, as if testing the word. "Not rescuer," he confirmed. "Not owner. Never that." Vivian's breath trembled, the first real trembling of the evening. "I have to rebuild everything," she said. "The estate, my reputation, my name. It will take years. It will be brutal." Alexander nodded. "I know. And you intend to—" She stopped. "I intend nothing," he said carefully. "I am telling you that I am still here after knowing all of it, and that I find you remarkable, and that I have no claim on what you do next." His eyes held hers. "What you do next is yours." Vivian was quiet for a moment. Then she said the truest thing in her. "I have spent 24 years being managed," she said softly. "First by my mother's grief, then by Basil's plans, then by the Ton's expectations." She lifted her eyes to his. "I don't yet know what I am when no one is managing me." Alexander's expression was open, genuinely, unguardedly open. "Then find out," he said, "and if you want company while you do—" He stopped himself, waited. Vivian finished the sentence for him. "I'll choose it myself." Alexander smiled, and she chose it. The months that followed were exactly as brutal as she had promised. The legal confirmation of the Ashcroft title took 6 weeks, 3 solicitors, 2 hearings, and 1 very irritated magistrate who clearly wished ancient letters patent would stop complicating his schedule. Basil contested it, of course. He lost. Not dramatically, not in a single devastating moment. He simply lost, step by step, clause by clause, precedent by precedent, until there was nothing left to contest, and the name Mortlake became London's shorthand for overconfidence meeting consequence. Vivienne moved into Ashcroft House in October. It smelled of old paper and neglect and something faintly like her mother's rose water, imagined or not. She stood in the entrance hall for a long time, alone. She did not cry. She simply catalogued everything that needed to be done. It was a very long list. She found it deeply satisfying. Alexander did not impose himself. He called twice in the first month, formally, correctly, with a card left at the door, accepted twice because she chose to accept it. He brought no advice she had not asked for. He offered no opinions on her decisions. When she made a choice he might have made differently, he said nothing unless she asked, and when she asked, he said it once and then let it rest. She tested this. Repeatedly, he passed every time. In December, at a ball she attended for the first time as Countess of Dunmore, standing in a room that had once looked through her, a matron cut her eyes at Vivienne's gown and murmured, loud enough to carry, "Self-made Countess, how modern." Vivienne turned to face the woman with an expression of such perfect, unhurried calm that the matron actually stepped back. "I was born to it," Vivienne said pleasantly. "Someone simply forgot to tell me." Laughter moved through the nearest group, genuine, startled, edged with relief that the joke had landed on someone else. Across the room, Alexander watched her with something in his eyes that he had never offered anyone. Not admiration exactly, not desire exactly, something rarer. Recognition. The look of a person seeing someone for who they actually are and finding it, to their own unguarded surprise, the most interesting thing in the room. When he crossed the floor to her, he did not claim her arm. He simply arrived beside her. "You're enjoying yourself," he observed. "Deeply," Vivienne agreed. "London is still deciding what to do with you." "London can take its time. I have an estate to restore and a title to establish, and no intention of waiting on London's permission to do either." Alexander looked at her, quiet with something warm. "May I have this dance, or is it inconvenient?" Vivienne considered him, this man who had held her deed and not known it, who had tested her and admitted it, who had witnessed her without managing her, who had stood in a ballroom full of people and offered her something she had never had from any of them. The simple, radical dignity of being believed. "It is perfectly convenient," she said, and she took his hand, not because she owed him anything, not because she needed anything, but because she wanted to, because wanting things, choosing things for herself on her own terms, without guilt or gratitude or performance, that, she had decided, was the whole point of having a name. My loveliest listener of the ton, if there is something to carry from Vivienne's story, it is this. A title is not a self, a rescue is not a relationship, and the most radical thing you can do in a room full of people who have decided what you are is simply refuse to agree. Vivienne did not win because she was saved. She won because she arrived. Until next time, keep your mask for the rooms that don't deserve your face and your name for the ones that do.